elections. Today, we are speaking with a representative from Voter Choice Arizona. Voter Choice Arizona is a nonpartisan group of mostly volunteers with a mission of educating Arizona voters about how better ballots will improve elections, give them more voice and more choice, and lead to better outcomes for our state. The last time that these folks were here, it was one of our best reviewed, I would say, discussions that we've had. So I'm really excited today to welcome Ray Kimball. And Ray is going to tell us all about how he got involved in this and then drop a whole bunch of knowledge about why he advocates for voter choice. So welcome, Ray. Thank you so much.
Jeannie, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for being here. It is a real pleasure and honor to be with this group, with a group of folks that feels so strongly about our governance system and about how we can improve it. I'm a member of what's known as Veterans for All Voters, which is a national nonprofit that mobilizes veterans in support of voting reform and voter advocacy movements all over the country. And because I'm a local here in Arizona, I work with Voter Choice Arizona as a speaker on their behalf. Lindsay, thank you for putting that link in there. I appreciate it. I mentioned my veteran affiliation because really there's two things from that experience that I think are relevant to the conversation that we're going to have today. First is that really great things can happen when people lay aside their partisan differences and work towards a common goal. And the other, unfortunately less positive, is that bad systems beat good people every time. And so over the next hour, I'm going to walk you through our election system. I'm going to talk about how it's beating good people and about ways that we can improve it. Now, I'm going to make sure that I save at least 20 minutes or so at the end for questions, but please do feel free to put questions in the chat as we go along. I may answer them in stride. I may keep them to the end. We'll just kind of see how that goes. But bottom line, what I'm hoping to do here today is help you connect the dots between a broken system, our political dysfunction, and the impact that election reform can potentially have. Now, because it is Halloween, I think it's only appropriate to start off with some treats. So to say thanks for participating, I'm going to send an Amazon drone to each one of your locations with a yummy treat. Okay, I'm not really going to do that, but play along with me anyway, and you'll see where we're going with this. Now, there's only one catch, which is that I have to send the same treat to everybody. So we're going to vote on it, and I'm actually going to ask that we vote on it two ways. The first is I'm going to give you a ranked choice ballot that you can choose to rank 5 choices. Now, you can access that ballot either using the link that I just put in the chat, or you can scan the QR code that's on your screen, whichever you are most comfortable with. So I'm going to ask that folks go ahead and access that now and put those votes in. And then at the same time, in addition to that ranked choice ballot, I'm going to ask all of you to vote on the Zoom poll that is now up on your screen. And you'll notice they're the exact same choices. Okay, the only difference is that on the Zoom poll, you only get a single choice. So I'm going to give you just a little bit more time to cast your votes on that. I see some votes have come in on the ranked choice already, which is awesome. And the Zoom votes are streaming in as well. And I'll give it, probably about 15 or 30 more seconds for folks to put their responses in on both. So I see about 25 responses on Zoom. Ian, can I vote for trying to knock the Amazon drone out of the sky? Not a recommended technique, and unfortunately not a choice on this ballot, I'm afraid. Okay, and we're getting close to the same number on the ranked choice ballots. So I'll give it just a little bit more time. All right, and I'm going to close it in. I'm going to close both of the polls in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, let's close these out. And let's take a look at our results. So in our straight ballot, we had a vote for the classic fudge brownie square. We had a plurality of that, but we didn't have a majority number of votes. Now, when we look at our ranked choice ballot, and I will go ahead and move that over onto my screen. Folks should be able to see it at their end as well, but I will go ahead and put it up here. We also see that we had a majority rule on classic fudge brownie square, but we had a majority of votes ended up getting cast for that, which is an interesting result. So sometimes you'll get the opportunity to see differing results. Sometimes you'll get similar results. So in this case, they both ended up being about the same, with the banana bread loaf being roughly second. So this was just an opportunity to demonstrate, let you get a sense of how ranked choice voting actually works as a mechanism. So what I want to do now, and let me turn off that poll as well. So let me just take a moment and talk about how we choose our elected officials. And this isn't meant to insult anybody's intelligence, call anybody back to Schoolhouse Rock for those of a certain age, but I find that it is helpful just to talk through terminology and process real quick, just so that we're all using the same language and we're on the same sheet of music. So choosing our officials begins with qualifying for the ballot through a signature gathering process. Once you gather enough signatures in order to be listed on a primary ballot, you run in a party primary. If you are selected in that party primary, you then move forward and you run in the general election. And the problem with this system is that at every single stage of it, outdated election rules erode competition, accountability, and responsiveness. So let's go into each aspect of this system so that we can talk about the problems that happen, how we can fix it, and the difference that it's going to make. So let's start off first off with the signature process. And the problem with the signature process comes when we talk about independent candidates. Okay. As I said, you have to gather a certain number of signatures to qualify for the ballot, and for independents, that's almost impossible. In Arizona, for most offices, independents have to gather up to 6 times more signatures than party candidates, and that is regardless of office. And even if they do manage to meet that threshold, they still are not able to run in primary elections. So they're unable to get that initial burst of momentum that candidates get by running in there. So a few years ago, the Arizona Republic looked at records to see if an independent had ever won a statewide or a federal office in Arizona, and they couldn't find one, despite the fact that independents are now the largest voting bloc as a category in Arizona. So, how do we fix this? Very simple. We equalize the signature requirements for all offices. We require the same percentage, whether that's 1.5%, 2%, whatever the case may be. We equalize the signature requirements across the board. We also open primary elections to all candidates. So rather than registering for a particular primary, you're going to register for a general primary. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. What that does is it allows more candidates to step forward. It allows us to have increased competition for our offices, and it allows that competition to improve our politics. And let me show you how that plays out then in the primary system that we're envisioning. So we talked about signatures. Now we move and we start talking about the primaries. So Arizona has 30 legislative districts where we elect 90 state lawmakers every 2 years. And in addition to that, we've got 9 congressional districts where we elect our representatives to the House. Now, as you can see up there on the slide, 24 of those 30 legislative districts and 6 of those 9 congressional districts are considered to be safe. And what we mean by that is that one party in that district leads voter registration by 10% or more. And in the math of our elections, that means that that party will almost always win the general election. And so the reality is that in those safe districts, which again make up the vast majority of our voting districts, the primary is the real election. The general election is really just a rubber stamp of the primary results. Adding to that problem, only about 29% in total of voters show up for primaries, roughly about 15% for each party. And so the reality is that in a crowded primary, somebody can win that primary, and if it's a safe district, win the whole shebang with as little as 8% of the vote. That's ultimately not a lot of accountability. Let me show you how this has played out in practice. This happens to be my congressional district, Congressional District 5. It's the one that we use as an example for our talk. Now, I want you to notice the winner here. Biggs won by only 16 votes. That's it. 16 votes. Not even close to a majority. Very, very thin, narrow. But then when we move on to the general election, he crushes Fuentes almost 2-1, again, because of this status as a safe district. So what does that mean? Well, it means that by default, Andy Biggs won his primary with only 8% of that primary. And lest anybody think that I'm picking on Republicans, this is not solely a Republican issue. Biggs won with 8% of his voters. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez won by 11%. Okay? The reality is when a fringe elects you, a fringe can unseat you. If you're a lawyer and a lawmaker, and you're trying to decide whether to vote for a bill, you should be asking yourself, is this good policy? Is this what my constituents want? The reality is that under this system, current politicians only ask one question: will I survive my next primary if I vote for this bill? That's the reality, because this fringe can serve as kingmakers and as queenmakers. So that mindset keeps our representatives from representing us. They are not accountable to a majority, and they're not responsive to a majority. So how do we give voters more say, even in safe districts? We move to all candidate primaries. Instead of having separate primaries for Republicans, Democrats, and if the Libertarians and the Greens want to have them as well, they can. We have all candidates on a single ballot in a single primary. Now, in an all-candidate primary, you as the voter still only vote once for each office from that list. But instead of just one person advancing from that primary, now 5 people can advance from that primary, listed in order of how they receive the most votes. Now what we're doing is we're moving real choices from the primary to the general. Okay, even in a district that's totally dominated by one party, with 5 people advancing, you still have a choice. You still have a diversity of perspectives. So again, going back to that 2016 primary, if we just go by the numbers that were on here, and again, notice that one variable that's not present here is that independents were not able to vote in this election unless they chose to draw a ballot for one party or another. Not all independents choose to do that. So there is a wild card there. Even if we totally factor out independents, in this safe district, you would have had 4 Republican candidates and a Democratic candidate advancing from the primary to the November ballot. Now, you could certainly argue, why not more than 5? Why not 10? Why not 15? Well, the hard truth is that the more candidates you advance, the more folks actually have to research, they have to do homework, they have to pin down who these people are. So we think that advancing 5 candidates from the primary to the general really helps keeps things manageable. And so we think that what all candidate primaries will do, it's going to encourage more candidates to run because they've got a better chance of advancing to the general election than they do right now. Okay? There's going to be more competition in the general election because of these greater numbers that are in there. More independents, like me, I'm a registered independent. More independents are going to vote because now they don't have to choose between requesting a ballot for one side or another. They can vote on all of the offices, on all of the candidates, just like their party member friends and colleagues. And as I said, everybody's going to have more choices. It's important to note all candidate primaries are not a new thing. They're not untried. They're not pie in the sky. This is how most Arizona cities already elect their mayors, their council members, other municipal offices like that. So we already have experience in doing this. We already know how to do an all candidate primary. We simply choose not to use it for state and federal offices. So then moving from the primary into the general election, here's our third problem. The reality is that the way that our system is set up right now, we've really got a bad choice in November. Because we are using a pick one voting system, we either have to limit the number of candidates to 2, or we bring in more candidates and then we run the risk of having vote splitting spoil an election. We've seen that happen in recent history. In the 2000 election with the distribution of votes in Florida, in 1992 with the distribution of votes nationwide. And again, lest anybody think I'm picking on one party or another, these are 2 different examples where the results ended up with a party result that would have been different from in a different system. So the bottom line is we know we want more candidates, right? We want to avoid this problem of voting for the lesser evil. But we run into this problem of spoilers. So how do we stop vote splitting when there's 5 candidates that we've advanced from the primary into the general? We use ranked choice voting. Now, you already had a chance to experience ranked choice voting. You already had a chance to go into it, but let me show you how ranked choice voting would work in an actual election situation as opposed to voting for treats from Amazon, and then give you a sense of how it works out. So this is what a typical ranked choice ballot would look like. And I want you to note, this is an election for one office. You are only getting 1 vote counted, but you are being allowed to rank up to 5 choices, up to 5 choices, just like you did for the treats. And so let me just show you how this would work for me. So let's say I want to start with the Libertarian candidate. I like Emily Campbell. I like her platform. She's my number 1 choice. Okay. But I'm concerned that libertarians don't necessarily have the best track record on winning elections. So I want to make sure that I use my follow-on choices to make sure that my voice gets heard. So for my second choice, I'm going to pick Priya Patel, who's from the Working Families Party and has also gotten a Democratic nomination because I like her platform. I think she speaks for me. Then I'll move on to Mateo Garcia, who in this case is more of a moderate, somebody that I can work with, somebody that I feel like I can vote for. Now, I want to note that at any point, I can stop making choices. If there are only 3 candidates on this ballot that I really feel like I can support, I can stop right here and only go up to 3 choices. But just to show you how a completely filled out ballot would work, here's my final ballot as I filled it out. So here, note that I've made choices for all of the candidates. I'm still only getting 1 vote, but I've made my choices and I can show that I can guarantee that my voice is going to be heard. And so let me show you how a typical ranked choice voting election would actually play out. So here's round 1 of our ranked choice election. And these are candidates A, B, C, D, and E. Now, in ranked choice voting, there are really 2 rules. 1, you have to win with a majority. Second, every voter gets 1 vote. Pretty fair rules, right? Pretty straightforward, certainly pretty democratic, right? So if a candidate gets 50% plus one vote in the first round of voting, they win. As you can see here in this case, nobody has made that 50% threshold. Now, if this were a regular election with 5 candidates, candidate E would win outright, but they'd win with only a plurality. So now we go to our first step in the ranked choice voting process. Since candidate A had the least number of votes, candidate A gets eliminated. Now, folks who cast a first choice vote for candidate A, now their ballots move to their second choices. Look what happened here. Now, folks who voted candidate E as their second choice, their votes now get counted towards E. Same thing, second choice for D gets counted there, second choice for C gets counted there. You're still only getting one vote, and we still don't have a 50% threshold yet, but we're closer. So now we're going to eliminate the next lowest candidate in terms of votes, which is candidate B. Once we eliminate candidates B, folks, now remember that in some cases, now we're going to people's second choice. In some cases, we're going to people's third choice, right? Because you might have voted for candidate A as your first choice, candidate B as your second choice. Just because those candidates are being eliminated doesn't mean your vote is being eliminated. You're just moving to your next choice. And so now here in this what we see, based on having those second and third choice votes that have now been applied, now candidate E has a majority and has won the election. So what does this do for us? Well, it prevents vote splitting, first and foremost, and lets winners be able to show majority support. It also promotes respectful and issue-focused campaigns because now candidates aren't just incentivized to be your top vote, now they're also incentivized to be your second and potentially even your third vote. And we see this play out in ranked choice voting elections. We see candidates say, vote for me, but if you can't vote for me as your first choice, please consider me as your second choice. They're intentionally having to appeal to a broader sector of the electorate. And so it's encouraging diverse voices. It's encouraging you to vote your values because now you can vote your conscience without feeling like you're wasting your vote. Okay? It really is as simple as shopping or as picking a treat, as we mentioned. One of the other critiques that gets thrown at ranked choice voting a lot is, well, nobody uses it, and I don't want to be the first to actually use it. I don't want to be some guinea pig. In reality, in 2024, over 14 million people used ranked choice voting in the United States. It is the fastest growing election reform in the country. Maine uses it in their federal, state, and some city elections. Alaska uses it in all candidate primaries and ranked choice voting in the general elections. The only difference in Alaska is they advance a top 4 instead of our recommendation of a top 5. The states that you can see on here that are in light green give cities the option to use RCV. The states in blue use it for some city elections. Light gray states don't use it at all. A recent phenomenon, unfortunately, is that the dark gray states that are on there have banned the use of it statewide. What's really interesting, though, is that those states that have banned it statewide, some of those states actually allow it to be used for overseas military voting and federal elections. Bonnie, I see your question. I will get to audits here at the end, but that's a great question, and I want to get to it. Okay. So when we talk about these 3 reforms all together, equalizing requirements, equalizing signature requirements for candidates, an all-candidate primary, and ranked choice voting in the general election, those 3 reforms together are what we call final 5 voting. Any of these reforms can be used separately, and they're good and they're helpful when they're used separately. But the hard truth is that they are much better and they're much more effective when we put them all together and you get the synergy of all of these different effects together. So if it's so great, why aren't we using it? Well, let's talk about a couple reasons. First and foremost, status quo bias, right? All of us have experienced this. All of us are comfortable with certain parts of our life that are familiar, and we stick with the familiar even when it's broken. A lot of times people will just rationalize it and say, well, that's just the way it is and it doesn't really work. It can't be audited. Bonnie, I promise I will get to your question. So a lot of this is just status quo bias. Another big contributor is a lack of awareness. Most folks are not aware of how ranked choice voting works, of how it functions, and so people are concerned about it. That's why Voter Choice Arizona is so focused on education. We want to get out there and educate and inform people about what Final Five voting looks like so that folks can be comfortable with it. And then the final piece is that citizen initiatives are expensive. The hard truth is that it is extremely unlikely that the state legislature will ever vote in Final Five voting on its own. The incentives just simply aren't there. They are incentivized to maintain the system as it is. So instead, it's going to require a ballot initiative, and those are expensive. And in order to do that, we've got to build public support so that those citizen initiatives can have a chance. So how do we do that? First and foremost, we inform the public. And all of you have taken that first step, and thank you for being here for it. As we inform the public, we work to help cities adopt ranked choice voting. Remember, cities already have all candidate primaries for most cities, I should say, already have all candidate primaries for most of their municipal offices. So adding in ranked choice voting is not necessarily a big jump for them. By the same token, supporting reform-minded candidates is really important. Supporting candidates that will actually give voice to this initiative, and at the same time engaging party leaders. We've got a ballot initiative that covers Final Five voting ready to go, but again, we have to make sure that there's the popular support and popular knowledge before we set a big pile of money on fire in trying to get that initiative through. So, how can you help? First and foremost, we would love to have you as a supporter. You can go to our website, voterchoicearizona.org. Lots of different opportunities. You could be a speaker like me. You can phone bank. There are lots of different ways that you can use your time and talents. By all means, please spread the word. Get the word out to other folks that want to try and experience this. We would love to have you volunteer. And of course, we absolutely welcome your donations. This is not cheap to do. It is not easy to do. And we are committed to having a cost-effective presence that is out there. The last thing that I want to share with you, just to give you a little bit of homework following this, and then we'll go into questions, is a great documentary called Majority Rules 101. And it's a YouTube documentary that talks about how Alaska put its system, which again is very similar to ours, in place, and how they got that. It's about make sure that you look for Majority Rules 101. That's the 30-minute version. There is a Majority Rules is an hour-and-a-half version, which, as you can imagine, is a little bit more of a slog. With the 30-minute version, really, I think you can get at what you need. So I really appreciate your time and your attention. I want to go ahead and start addressing some of the questions that were in there. I think the first one was from Bonnie that was asking about audit. Jeannie, is that right?
Well, let's see. I don't know if you covered fusion voting, but the first one, am I right? The first one that I'm seeing is what are your thoughts on layering fusion voting into the RCV mix for an all candidate open primary?
So I'll confess I'm not familiar with the term fusion voting. So I don't know if it's possible to have that, to give that questioner the ability to open a microphone or speak on that. I would be I would love to hear what fusion voting is, because it may be very similar to what we're proposing here. I'm just not familiar with that term.
You know, we could, if it's okay with Ian, pull him into this conversation too. He's the chair of our board because he lives in Oregon and he might be able to speak to that. So I don't know if Lindsay can give him those permissions and pull him into the oh, he's coming downstairs. So, yeah. Okay, wait. So let me take this off because that way they'll be able to hear you.
Yeah. So
hold on.
Is this good?
I don't know if he can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Oh, you can't.
Yeah. Hey, so thanks for the question, or taking the question. And so in Oregon, which is where I live, normally they call it fusion voting, but it's essentially the example you had earlier where one of the ranked choices on your example was both endorsed by the Democratic Party and the Working Families Party. So that's something that I know is important, for example, to the Working Families Party, because they don't want to spoil ever in an election. They want to avoid that. But when you have fusion voting, meaning you can be endorsed by more than one party on the ballot, then that avoids that.
Yeah, and so yes. So in our
Thank
proposal,
you.
there would certainly not be any barrier to a candidate getting endorsements from more than one party. Absolutely, that is absolutely part of the possibility. No worries at all on that.
Okay. And then let's see. This one's from Barb and Marquetta. Why have 5 candidates go to the general election, not 2 or 3? This virtually ensures that candidates will have majority support.
Sure. So because think about these safe voting districts. If you only have 2 or 3 move forward, the likelihood of having a number of candidates that actually represent the broad spectrum of perspectives in there is likely not actually going to cover that. We see this in Alaska. We've seen this in other places where 4 or 5 seems to be the sweet spot. And again, remember, you're getting that majority. You don't necessarily need to get a majority in the primaries. All you need to get is the top 5 number of votes. Then when you're moving into the general election, that's when the ranked choice voting is coming into effect. So now you've got the opportunity to rack and stack those folks. That guarantees that they will get a majority after the ranked choice voting is applied.
Okay. Yeah, and now you're right. Bonnie had a question. How could ranked choice ever be audited by hand?
Sure. So let me point out by one thing that by hand audits are heavily discouraged in most localities, because what you're doing when you do an audit by hand is you're introducing additional bias into that, right? You're introducing that additional bias. At least when you're doing an automated count, you've got a consistent bias, a consistent margin of error that is being applied. Whereas if you start doing hand counts, again, this is why the Arizona Attorney General has come out against hand counts. But I think to Bonnie's kind of larger question, and Bonnie, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I think one of the questions that often comes up is, this feels like a black box. How do we actually know, like, how the votes got assigned? And so what I've got up on the screen right now is an example of the ranked choice vote from Alaska's election. And I bring House election, and I bring this up because it comes up in there all the time. So if you take a look here at round 1, you see the way that the votes broke down. Mary Peltola ended up with 48%, did not have a majority. Okay, Sarah Palin had roughly 25%. Nick Begich had another 23%. Now, look at what happened in after round 1. Chris Bai, with our lowest candidate, okay, the votes for him got canceled out as those first choices, and then those second choices got applied on here. Now, you'll notice that in some cases we had exhausted votes, 900 exhausted votes. What that means is that out of those 4986, roughly 900 people chose not to mark a second or third choice ballot. Okay, they said, nope, I'm not really interested in casting a vote for anybody else other than Chris Bai. Fine, so be it. Still didn't end up with a majority. Got it closer, 49% with Mary Peltola, but we still didn't have a majority. So we move on to round 3. In round 3, Nick Begich, who is the lowest scoring candidate, the choices for him get canceled out. They get moved and applied to other candidates. Look at what happened in exhausted votes. We got almost 15,000 now exhausted votes. This is because Sarah Palin campaigned and said, if I'm not your number 1 vote, I don't want your vote at all. No kidding. She actually said that. If I'm not your number 1 vote, don't put me on the ballot at all. And that's what people did. Okay, you don't want to be my number 2, my number 3? I'm not going to do that. So people point to this and say, oh, well, ranked choice voting always empowers moderates. Well, when the extremes do dumb things like take themselves out of the running, yes, it empowers moderates. But there is nothing about ranked choice voting in and of itself that empowers moderates. And again, as you can see, every vote is being tracked here. Every vote is being there. So you've got the same audit protections that are in place as you have in conventional elections. Great question, Bonnie. Thank you.
Okay, Jay is asking, is ranked choice voting being used in other countries?
You know, I have tried to find that. Um, I have not seen I have not seen a lot of use of ranked choice voting overseas. It's important to remember that most countries don't have the kind of winner take all, first past the post elections that we do. Okay, most countries have more of a parliamentary system where there's proportional voting, there's different allocations. So ranked choice voting is really a solution to our specific electoral challenges rather than necessarily something that's going to be applied worldwide.
Okay, let's see. Question here is, what do the Democrat and Republican parties think about this?
Well, I think you only have to look at the response to Proposition 140 last year, right? Proposition 140 was very similar to this. It had the equalized signature requirements. It had the all candidate primaries. The biggest difference was that Proposition 140 gave the legislature the ability to decide how many candidates would move from the primary to the general. It could be anywhere between 2 and 5 candidates. And if they chose for it to be anywhere between 3 and 5 candidates moving to the general, then there had to be a ranked choice voting option. So, what happened when Proposition 140 got on the street? Well, first off, even as it was gathering signatures, the legislature put a competing ballot proposition on the initiative on the ballot that was the exact opposite, that would have locked into the Constitution the current system of closed primaries. So then, what happened when Proposition 140 actually made the signature requirements and became an initiative that could be on the ballot? Both parties marshaled lawsuits against it, claiming incorrectly that it violated different aspects of the Arizona Constitution. They lost every single one of those lawsuits. Every single one of them was held to be without merit. But what all that did was it delayed the ability of Proposition 140 to be campaigned for. So when you talk with party leaders, they may say, well, we like the idea of people having, representation. I'm a big believer in deeds, not words. And their deeds, I think, really showed what this, how they feel about it.
Here's a question from David. The secular easy audience, all of us geeks, we love getting into the weeds like this, but I'm concerned that the more we explain it, the more we confuse the general population. Please boil it down to the shortest statement that we could use to sell it to people who aren't as interested in understanding the whole process, if you've got one.
Absolutely, David. And this was a big lesson learned from a lot of the 2024 elections for ranked choice voting for initiatives. The simplest way is this. Ranked choice voting allows you to pick candidates in the same way that you pick groceries. It's that simple. So when you think about it, if I walk into the grocery store and I say, all right, I'm going to get pasta. I really like Barilla noodles. They're my favorite. But if I don't have Barilla, then okay, I'll get ragu, and maybe I'll get I want to say the fries brand, but I'm absolutely not going to get brand, Z or A. That you have just made a ranked choice. You had a number one, you had a number two, you had a number three, and you went with it. So ranked choice voting allows you to pick candidates in the same way that you pick groceries. That's the short version of it.
I think that's a great way to help. I think of, I prefer to purchase things that are organic. Sometimes they don't have them at my Fry's. Sometimes they're wildly overpriced. There's all kinds of factors. So that I think is a great analogy to use to folks. Ian says, if I go into the voting booth stoned, I'll vote for a giant bag of Doritos.
Again,
Yes,
like shooting down the
absolutely, Ian,
Amazon
that is what
drone,
that means.
not a recommended technique, but a technique nonetheless. I see one from
He's filled with all
Bonnie.
kinds of techniques, that's for sure.
Yeah. I see one from Bonnie. In Alaska, did the fellow who got the lowest votes have to collect the same amount of signatures? Yes. Part of Alaska's reform was signature reform. So he had the same, he had the same signature requirements as everybody else.
Okay, and I feel like I saw another question, or no, it was more of a comment. David is saying, another important aspect of RCV to allay some fears. You can correct me. About 93% of general elections are settled without RCV because a candidate gained 50%. Okay.
Yeah,
And he said, yeah, go ahead.
I don't know that the number's that high. It's probably less than that, and I think it probably varies wildly depending on what kind of office you're talking about. It wouldn't surprise me that would be the case for like municipal elections. I think we should probably expect, just because of our national polarization, I think we should probably expect that as ranked choice voting gets applied to state and federal elections, that I think you will see more elections get the ranked choice piece applied. But honestly, there's only one way to find out.
Yeah. And he goes on to say that he believes that Ireland uses ranked choice voting. So fantastic. We already answered the question about Alaska. Okay. Okay. All right, so that's about, oh, there's another one it looks like in the queue. Nope, not another answer. Okay, I wish I could have a negative vote. So let's see, does your organization know if or when you're going to try to get this onto the ballot again?
I don't see it. So let me be clear first off, I don't speak for policy on the organization. So I need to just be very clear on that. This is not, please do not take this as an official statement of either Voter Choice Arizona or Veterans for All voters. I think right now the focus of the organization is much more on educational efforts like this. We really recognize that there's a lot of ground that we need to lay in terms of getting people to understand this. And frankly, we need to get more cities using ranked choice voting so that we can get people comfortable with it and we can build that momentum. That is the getting cities to use it for their voting system, for their offices. That's really the priority now rather than a ballot initiative, because that's how we're going to build experience and expertise that are ultimately going to build the support for a ballot initiative in the long run.
Yeah, when I saw Mark at ASU West earlier this week, that was, that was kind of his hope, that seems to be the winning strategy. And, there's certainly, I could see a couple of municipalities or even counties here in Arizona that would consider doing something like that. I wonder, and again, you might not know this because I don't even remember if Mark knew it, because I wonder if you could consider doing it in a countywide level, like where in Arizona we have all these countywide positions. Like, yeah, that would be, because I could see Pima County maybe considering something like that. And that would be,
You could absolutely do this at a county. You can do this at any level with any election, not just treats.
not just treats. Yeah. Um, yeah, I love, and Matt says, I love it. And it feels fairly intuitive and the only way really to vote out the oligarchs. And I love that it shifts the conversation, and it's far too much of our politics in this country has become like, it's bashing the other side. I never know. Sometimes even the person I'm voting for, like, okay, well, I know that you don't like this person. Although I would say that the party I typically vote for does it less, but they sure do it in the primaries. And so I would also enjoy not seeing friends and colleagues of mine destroy each other and burn through a bunch of cash. That's a whole other thing that I would like to see go away. Matt says, exactly, screw party loyalty. What are your policies and budget ideas? Full stop. Yeah,
What a radical idea to have an election about ideas.
Yeah.
Crazy talk, but it can be. Jay's question, does RCV also work in nonpartisan elections? Absolutely. It absolutely works. Really, because again, remember, it's an all candidate primary. That's still advancing to the general. The only thing that you're losing, frankly, in the nonpartisan elections is that party signaling of nominees of, hey, these people have our party's stamp of approval. That's the only thing you're losing. Everything else, all of the other mechanics work exactly the same.
Hmm. It makes me think too. I live in a complex where there is an HOA. I'm a renter, so I'm not on that board or anything. I have a friend who is very active on her HOA, and holy cow, those folks who live in places with HOAs have a lot to talk about all the time, it feels like. And it makes me feel like too, this could eliminate some of those issues. I know here there was a very heated election recently, and I mean, it was pitting neighbor against neighbor, and I just only knew the bit outside conversation. So even modeling it at that level could help to make RCV for HOAs. Yeah, it could at least normalize it, right? Where people, could potentially be forced to work together.
Yeah. I mean, again, what it really emphasizes is the idea that almost none of us are so narrowly focused on one thing to the exclusion of everything else. We are complex creatures. To use Whitman's statement, we contain multitudes, right? And so ranked choice voting really lets people express their preferences and rank order for themselves in a way that makes sense for them and lets it be expressed through the electoral process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unless you're Sarah Palin, then you might reject the idea. But I love that for her.
You
It's
might.
so,
And here's the beauty of that is if you are a hardcore party partisan and you feel very strongly, I will only ever vote for the hard right or the hard left candidate. Let's be very clear, this applies to both of our major parties. You can still vote that way in ranked choice voting. You can still fill that just one box. Just understand you're putting yourself at a disadvantage to others, right? You are choosing to unilaterally disarm in their face. But if you feel so strongly about that you are only ever going to cast that particular vote, you can do that.
mhm. So I don't know if you have the answer for this one, but James is asking, so how do we make this happen?
First and foremost, advocate for ranked choice voting in your city elections. More than anything else, contact council members, contact mayor, whoever runs your city elections. Ask, why aren't we using ranked choice voting for our city elections? Again, most city elections already have nonpartisan municipal elections. So they're 2/3 of the way there in terms of this process. Ask your city officials why they aren't using ranked choice voting. Make them answer that question.
Hmm. Yeah. All right. I'm going to chase HOAs down back in Oregon. Okay.
Better you
Um,
than me, Ian.
Right. Well, this has been, I mean, we're done a little bit early, but I'm happy to give people a little bit of time back. This is a great discussion. I think that means that you're just very succinct and to the point. So thank you so much, Ray, for joining us today. And one thing that, I like to ask people, given the fact that our timeline and our reality sometimes are a little bit uncertain and crazy making, I just wonder in these crazy making times, what gives you hope, Ray?
Um, what gives me hope is that there, over and over again, we see a desire for change from people, and we see a willingness to believe in the possibility of change and not just give up on things. Yes, I advocated for Proposition 140. I gathered signatures for it. I beat the pavement for it. I was disappointed when it failed. But what gave me hope was that an equal number of people that defeated Proposition 140 also defeated the legislature's proposition that would have locked in the partisan system into the Constitution. So people gave a very clear signal. They weren't ready for 140, but they sure as hell weren't wanting to lock in the status quo. That gives me hope.
Yeah, I love that. And you can keep track through the work that we do here through civic engagement beyond voting, but also I think a good thing for us to do would be to keep an eye on what our legislature is doing, because they do try to pull a lot of this like preemptive banning of things that don't match up with their political ideologies. So another great thing to do is stay informed. But thank you so much, Ray. I appreciate you and Mark and everybody over there at BCAZ and all of the work that you do. So yeah, I hope that everybody has a great spooky Halloween and a wonderful, safe weekend. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.